I don't think kids today understand that when you were a game programmer or developer, back in the early 2000s, you had to kind of pave your way or pay your dues making Facebook games because that was where, obviously Farmville exploded and Zynga became like a Fortune 500 company literally overnight with that game.
Yeah.
And it's changed so much since then. I think there still are Facebook games. I don't think anybody plays them, or not a lot of people play them. But and then you would go to mobile as well. Like with the mobile games, everyone wanted to you had to pay your due by doing that free to play mobile game, right? With the time gating and the all that jazz.
Yeah, the energy systems and stuff.
But since the early 2000s, we've almost seen like all of these different mediums combine: mobile, console, PC, crossplay on a lot of these new systems. What's it been like as a game developer seeing that kind of like mobile and console, like whether you don't mobile game or not, they're on the same platform, and like there's games on mobile that are on console, and some of them even allow crossplay. Like, what was it like seeing this world evolve over the last 20 years?
I mean, I think it's all for the better. I think there came a point where the demand was there because the platform holders were quite resistant to crossplay. They were like, no, we want our little walled off garden, don't you dare. We don't want, those other console players in our space or mobile players in our space. But I think there was just such a demand where people were like, I shouldn't need to own the same system as you to play a game with you. And so I think that's the most exciting part it shouldn't matter where your friends are, you should be able to play games with them. And I think especially this kind of like the post-pandemic sort of side of things, those social interactions become way more meaningful, and people want meaningful interactions now. It's why you saw something like Among Us that got released in 2018 suddenly blow up in 2020, and it's because the world changed, right? People, what they wanted changed, and I think that's why you've seen huge commitments from already very stable games like Destiny 2 commit to crossplay because they realize how important that is and the demand for that to be there, and God knows how much work that was to convert and take all of that legacy sort of programming and networking and then merge them all together. So it's crazy the technological feats that are being done to do crossplay kind of shows that I think like the social space of games is really, really evolving. And I think there's just so many people now as well. It has properly, we say it was mainstream back in 2013, but compared to now, we were dropping the bucket back then.
Yeah, it's still like, I don't think people understand it's still relatively new. Even my friends are like, oh, it doesn't have crossplay, that's ridiculous. I'm like, dude, it's only been a thing for the last few years, like, and it's amazing.
Yeah.
We really,
and I think the reason it's not freely available, let's say, is because of just it right now it's tough. It's not easy. I mean, we have cross-play between our PC users for Surgeon 2, but like the Xbox ecosystem is currently separate, and that's just because it's not an easy thing to do. So I applaud anyone who manages to pull it off, because it's a huge undertaking, and I'm sure that like the platform holders will, again, that demand will drive, and they'll realize that we need to make this as easy as possible because it actually only benefits the players, and the demand is there.
Harping back to when you mentioned, your studio does a lot of mobile games as well as like full-fledged console PC titles. When you go about, when you're in the design process, does it start out as a mobile game, or is it something you decide after the fact? Are you thinking this is really fun, but would it still on console? Like, take us through the process of when you're making the game, like Hogwash, for example, right? That's a mobile game. Like, was that always set out to be a mobile game? Did you originally set it to go on console, then figure out this would be better on mobile?
Yeah, so Hogwash was an interesting one. I wasn't on the team for that one. That came about because basically Apple were doing their Apple Arcade thing, right? And we'd worked with them a few times because before, our mobile games were basically, we prove on PC and then we make the mobile version. So Surgeon Simulator, when that Steam version came out and was really successful, we were like, okay, well, let's make it for mobile, which I think took us like 20 different iterations on the controls, because we were like, how do we map like Surgeon Simulator to a touch screen? So that was an interesting one. We did the same with Bread. Bread came out on PC. We were like, yep, right, let's make a console version. Oh no, we made the bread so you flop around with like triggers. How the hell do we do that on a touchscreen? So it was always, we made it so hard for ourselves because we didn't make normal games that were easy to control. And then we're like, sweet, let's have just like a one-dimensional touch input and try to recreate that experience. So we're just playing it on hard mode, basically, game dev on hard mode. But Hogwash are basically, yeah, like Apple were just, they just came by and were like, do you have any cool games? Because we did all the game jams, and we actually just went through some of our more recent game jams, and one of them was Hogwash, and they saw that and were like, boom, we want that on Apple Arcade. So we're like, sweet, and we put a team together, and yeah, so that was kind of just like, we always kind of excited by new technologies and new platforms. That's why we were sort of quite early with the VR stuff. We also released a game for like Apple Watch, and so when Apple Arcade was coming around, we were like, yeah, sure, why not? We'll throw our hat in, we'll have a go, because that's kind of how we, I don't know, that's what keeps us interested. It's why, for example, there wasn't a sequel to like Bread or Surgeon until, over half a decade later, because we're like, cool, we've done that, let's try something else. And so we play around for a few years, see where the technology's at, what it's doing, see what we can make. And then, yeah, that's why, technology got to a point where we're like, oh, actually, this is cool sort of networked physics stuff is getting a little bit more doable now, whereas in the past it was always, no, you don't do network physics, stay away from it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason World of Warcraft, you're in an invisible circle, rolling invisible dice, and nothing's physically interacting with anybody.
Yeah, exactly. And like Surgeon Simulator 2 has like hundreds of physical game objects with people tossing around, and you never know if the player's going to suddenly just tip up a table that's got like loads of stuff on it. That just wasn't possible when we were making the first game. So a lot of it, like the technology rolls around and we experiment like in sort of like game jams with it, and then we're like, well, actually, we could maybe do a multiplayer Surgeon Simulator with this, and that's kind of like how we drive. We see where the technology's at and what gets us excited.
How big is your team at Bossa now?
I believe we're like 50 to 60 or so. And we like to kind of keep like 2 projects going at one time, but then like almost like an ideation team that's quite fluid, like people move in and out of it, depending on what they sort of want to do. So yeah, it's usually kind of like 3 teams, usually going in succession. So for example, like before, we made Iron Fish entirely in lockdown. So we started that in June last year. That we originally were like prototyping and we validated back in 2019. We actually did a similar thing to Surgeon Simulator in that we put out the prototype or the game jam of it. And it ended up doing really well. Lots and lots of all of the old regular YouTubers were all playing it. So all these people that used to play Iron Bread and Surgeon Simulator were suddenly playing Iron Fish. So that was quite nice. It was a moment of like, I still have it, and that kind of, positivity with that, we were like, okay, sweet, we're going to put this forward. And at the time I was on the ideation team. I was in there like working with a few programmers and we were fiddling around with ideas. And then what we'd do is, we'd validate them, we'd put them out there, people excited. And so Iron Fish, I was always like, yeah, I think we can make it a sequel to Iron Bread. Like there's a way that we can kind of tie it in. It kind of feels familiar. It's like a puzzly adventure platformer, but I think we can go bigger, and I think, we can tie in all the story, and it's perfect sense, trust me. So then I basically said, and I want to lead the project, right? I want to lead design that project. And so they're like, sweet. And so they swapped me out of ideation, and then headed up the Iron Fish, which I think is pretty much done now. I think I'm now like on holiday for 2 weeks until launch because when it passes cert and Microsoft give you the good old rubber stamp, you're like, we can't make any more updates. That's the version that's going out. So what are you going to do? Go on holiday. So I've got like 35 days to use up. So that's the luxury of, paid time off, at least in Europe.
Can you talk about like, as since your studio is a lot bigger than 3 people, what it used to be back in the day, does that give you more? Are you still able to be creative and design and program, or are you more of a management role now?
No, I mean, so I personally requested that I don't sort of go into like management. I still feel like I haven't learned. I still just really love making games. I think the idea of then moving off into a management role just doesn't appeal to me, not when I still feel like I have so much to learn. And I think, there is nothing better than having all that team together and just, I don't know, for me, like making that core player experience. And I think that's why we were so kind of receptive to the YouTube like community and what we could, the reactions we could get there. That was just so exciting. It was a big driver for me. And so I think what it boils down to is because like in Iron Fish, I've done, you know, majority of like the level design and as well as like the actual game design and stuff, because just those moments of just setting up these like little cool set pieces and things like that, and these little vistas that you think are exciting. I don't know, it's just, I love kind of like just authoring the exact player experience, and when you kind of like, you want them to feel this way, you want this moment to kind of feel like this, and when it actually plays out, you're like, yes, it did.
Oh, yeah, I'm just curious because sometimes it happens like without somebody realizing, you know what I mean? Because obviously your company's grown and thrived, and then, you know, you're like, oh, I haven't made a game, and like, what? I'm managing people now. What happened? You know what I mean? Because it's just how you roll with the punches as you get bigger and bigger. You know?
Yeah,
that's interesting though.
We've got to have a very like good kind of flat structure at Bossa anyway, and we're always just keeping tabs on what you want to do. I think a lot of people can sometimes go into management because it's considered the way to go. Like that's how you progress, right? And so what happens is you usually get there and you're like, actually, this sucks. But you're like, yeah, but you know, this is how I progress in this industry or in this studio. So I've got to stick with it. And I think that's how you get bad managers. You need people who want to be there. And I've just been very honest. I mean, like, look, I will lead a team like creatively. I'm working with the leads, I'm working with other people, and we're making a game. But when it comes to just like that hands-off, like just kind of people management, I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. I want to be in the trenches making stuff. And so I just, yeah. And then they're like, and they go, cool, okay. And I still have progression within that. You know, there's like sort of, you know, levels of like principal programmer and things like that, right? We say you don't have to be a lead. You can just become more sort of recognized in your chosen role. So.
Then I have two more questions, and I'll make them quick. This question, you have me on record, Jarvie, that he doesn't have to answer it if he doesn't want to, but because I think it's a fun question. Was there anything, Luke, that you bought with your Surgeon Simulator money that was like really fun or crazy or wacky?
Oh God, no, I'm so boring. I'm trying to think like anything like out of, well, actually in the year of 2013, when like, yeah, obviously pretty life-changing stuff, and I was like, fuck. So I randomly was like, one weekend I was like, I want to go to Japan next week. and I booked the flight, and then in a week I just went to Japan. I found out a week wasn't long enough for Japan, but it was yeah, that was like, holy crap. When you grow up in, you know, poor part of England and without, you know, on benefits and stuff, you're like, just the idea of, it was this weird liberating thing to be like, I can just book a flight and I can go to Japan. And it was like weird and scary, but I was like, this is kind of cool as well. I should definitely just very much appreciate all the privilege I have that I can do this. And the fact that I get to do that because I made a video game, I think, you know, child me head would implode if I told him that, you know.
And then leading into my other question, it's going, if you could go back 10 years and talk to yourself in the past tense from what you know now, what would you tell a past Luke, 10 years younger Luke?
I mean, that was when I joined Bossa. And I think I joined as QA with the hopes that I would become a designer. So I almost wouldn't want to tell him anything because he might fuck it up. So I'd be like, just
double thumbs up and just be like,
don't worry about it. It'll work. I even worry that saying like it'll work out will mean that it wouldn't work out, and I'd somehow stop it from happening. So yeah, I would watch from the bushes and leave him alone because I know he will actually become a lead designer, making stupid stuff.